Dreyer. I'm the president of the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame Foundation. So happy to have you here with us today in this ceremony to honor the induction of Stan Temple into the Hall of Fame. I'll be your MC for this event, and we're live streaming it. I'm located right here in Stevens Point in the heart of Wisconsin at the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame Gallery at Schmeeckley Reserve Visitor Center and on the campus of the University of Wisconsin, Stevens Point. We have speakers from around the state joining us and Stan himself. We're really pleased to have you join us, and we are grateful, so grateful for the technology to bring us all together today. Thanks for joining us. There's a quote by Mary Austin that reads, "Man is not himself only, he is all that he sees, all that flows to him from 1,000 sources. He's the land, the lift of the mountain lines, the reach of its valleys." As you will find out from the story of Stan Temple today, we can add to Mary Austin's quote and say a man is also the birds that he encounters from his backyard to the far reaches of the world, birds that claim his heart and give flight to his legacy. Stan's story is an inspiring one, so get set. Also being honored today in a separate event is Gary Eldred at 3 o'clock. It's not too late to register for that event. If you'd like to, you can do so at our website. We'd like to thank our event sponsors, the Aldo Leopold Foundation, Ice Age Trail Alliance, Jaeger Mellerop Family Charitable Trust, Luther College, Midwest Renewable Energy Association, Museum of Danish America, the Prairie Enthusiasts, Trout Unlimited Wisconsin Council, Wisconsin Society for Ornithology, University of Wisconsin Stevens Point, and the Wisconsin Wildlife Federation. Let me share with you a little bit about how this event will flow. Two distinguished guests will begin by sharing the highlights of Stan's life and career. Then we'll present Stan with his official recognition from the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame Foundation and turn the microphone over to him to take the stage and share his thoughts. An official legislative citation from the state of Wisconsin will follow, and at the close of the event, we are going to open the chat feature for those who are participating in the live event. At this time, you'd be able to tap some notes. So you want to be thinking about what would you say if you could shake Stan's hand today in this ceremony in person? And those are the kinds of notes perhaps you would like to put in the chat at the end of the ceremony. Are you ready? Let's get started with this wonderful ceremony. We'll begin by sharing a video about the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame and the induction process.
The Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame Foundation was created in 1984 to encourage the growth and practice of a conservation ethic as a legacy for the people of Wisconsin. The Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame is a nonprofit organization guided by a board of directors representing more than 30 conservation organizations. Each year, the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame inducts up to 3 people into the Hall of Fame. To date, there are over 100 inductees who have been honored. You can learn about each of these conservation champions on the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame website or by visiting the Hall of Fame Gallery. The Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame Gallery of Inductees is located in beautiful Schmeeckley Reserve, which is a natural area on the campus of the University of Wisconsin Stevens Point, with 5 miles of nature trails and wildlife viewing opportunities. Inside the Schmeeckley Reserve Visitor Center, guests can view engraved wooden plaques about inductees with quotes highlighting their contributions. A touchscreen computer gives visitors a chance to connect with Wisconsin's conservation heritage as they browse the stories and learn about the achievements of each inductee. Any person or organization can nominate someone for induction into the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame. Nominees have an array of environmental and conservation-related backgrounds and varying types of education and experience. From writers to artists, from educators to policymakers, from researchers to managers, Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame heroes come from all backgrounds and walks of life. Based on standards and criteria set by the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame Board of Directors, all inductees must have significant ties to Wisconsin, and their contributions must have wide-reaching impact, affecting a range of natural resources. Each summer, a 5-member Board of Governors reviews nominations. The highly esteemed governors are an independent body and have in-depth knowledge of Wisconsin's conservation history. The governors select 5 nominations to forward to the Board of Directors for their consideration. The Board of Directors select the following year's inductees from that list of finalists at their annual fall meeting. While voting membership in the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame is only open to organizational members of the foundation, individuals may participate in the mission by providing annual support as affiliate members. The financial support of member organizations and affiliate members allows the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame to celebrate, advance, and share Wisconsin's conservation legacy as it hosts induction ceremonies and maintains inductee archives. We invite you to learn more about the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame and Wisconsin's conservation heritage by visiting our website at wchf.org.
Now I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Kurt Meine. Kurt attended the first Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame induction ceremony at the same time I did, way back in 1985. Kurt is a senior fellow with the Aldo Leopold Foundation. He's also adjunct associate professor in the Department of Forest and Wildlife Ecology at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And when Kurt finishes his part of the presentation, he'll introduce his colleague, David Drake, our second speaker, who will finish the presentation and highlight Stan Temple's life, career, and legacy. Kurt, the podium is all yours.
Again, thank you, Patty, and thank you to everyone at the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame. It's great to be with you again. I start to associate this time of spring with joining in you and the entire community of the Hall of Fame, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be here, and it's a real honor and pleasure to help induct Stan Temple into the Hall of Fame. I have known Stan for 40 years now. Doing the math this morning, I was shocked by that, but it's been a 40-year opportunity to learn from Stan. He has been a mentor and a teacher. He has been a colleague. He has been a friend. And I hope he wouldn't mind my saying at the moment that he is also an elder in our community of conservation, by which I mean not just in Wisconsin, but nationally and globally. So my job today is to take you through the first part of Stan's life and to help set the stage for all that he was able to accomplish through his career and continues to work on every day. Stan says he's retired, but I've never believed it for a minute, and he shows no evidence of being retired. So through those 40 years, I have had the privilege of seeing Stan's work and influence at all those levels, from Wisconsin to the world, and to appreciate more and more every day the remarkable breadth, depth, and connections that Stan has brought to his work. Okay, let's use this. There we go. So again, my job today is to take our group through the first part of Stan's life before he was fully engaged here in Wisconsin. So let's start at the beginning. Stan was born in 1946 in Cleveland, Ohio, After some migrations of his own around the country to other parts of the nation, he ended up back in Cleveland. And Stan tells the story, and I love this story, that on the very first day he went to school, he saw a bird hit the window and right next to his desk, and spent the entire day, the entire first day of school, frustrating his teacher by constantly looking out the window and ignoring his classroom activities. And when his mom picked him up, Stan immediately rescued the injured bird. So here we go, an early indicator from day one. That not only was Stan going to be caring for the living world, but that he would engage in hands-on activities to express that care. One of the things that Stan, oops, hold on here. I want to make sure I got that right. We're missing a slide there. So, So let's move on to an early encounter that Stan had. Oh yeah, I see, okay. When his mother realized that Stan's fascination with birds wasn't just going to be a passing phase, she allowed Stan to attend field trips for the local Audubon Society. And it is there that he encountered someone he knew as Miss Carson. And she became one of his earlier mentors. Of course, the world now knows her as Rachel Carson. And this is another hallmark of Stan's life and work, that he seems to have intersected, without any planning, some of the most remarkable leaders in our conservation world, and has brought that influence to so many others. And I'll also highlight that it was through the local Audubon Society, and that Stan, in fact, again, shows that early on he was going to be working with and through nonprofit organizations to advance the cause. Stan's early passion for birds soon begins to focus on raptors, especially, and falcons. His first bird was, in fact, a kestrel, as you see in these slides. This early interest in birds of prey led to Stan exploring falconry. It would be a constant again through his life and work. He found several falconers who gave him encouragement, starting with the kestrel, and the raptors and falconry became a passion for the rest of Stan's life, as he applied many of the skills he acquired through falconry to conservation projects for threatened raptors. In Cleveland, Stan was able to make connections through other institutions in the city during summer programs with Cleveland Metropolitan Parks. Stan so impressed the naturalists there that they made him a spokesperson on TV programming for youngsters. This was an indicator of another theme that would become so critical to Stan's importance and influence, and that is as a communicator, again, at an early age. The Kirtland Bird Club in Cleveland adopted Stan as a precocious birder and further expanded his network of naturalists. Stan became well known at an early age in Cleveland's natural history community. The director of the Cleveland Museum of Natural History hired Stan as one of 5 high school students, adding him to the museum staff in hopes that the experience would propel them to careers in natural science. And of course it did. So now we see another way in which Stan's work was predicted by these early activities as a researcher and scientist. This leads him to set his sights on a career in ornithology and conservation. Stan attended Cornell University and worked at the renowned Cornell Lab of Ornithology. And among the ornithologists he met there was another member of the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame, Joe Hickey, who was a lab board member. Joe was so impressed with Stan, and especially with the fact that he had read a Sand County Almanac and knew a lot about Aldo Leopold. And Stan's connection with Leopold was largely because one of Leopold's grad students, a fellow named Dan Thompson, was Stan's academic advisor and had shared many stories about Leopold. And so here again, we see these connections through Stan's life that probably he didn't fully understand at the time, but that would go on to shape his trajectory. On that first Earth Day, while Stan was at Cornell, he led a teach-in on the land ethic. And so we see the emphasis early on education and ethics. During his graduate studies at Cornell, Stan encountered another key figure in the history of conservation and especially bird conservation. That's Tom Cade. Tom Cade arrived at Cornell just as Stan was about to graduate and quickly decided to take Stan on as one of his first grad students. Stan joined Tom's new program on raptor conservation and was involved in the pioneering efforts to study and restore the peregrine falcon. That early involvement in managing the recovery of endangered species led to an opportunity to influence planning for the then new Endangered Species Act by emphasizing active management rather than passive protection of endangered species. And so I'll emphasize two other points at that phase in Stan's work: that he was applying the scientific knowledge that he was acquiring, but also that he was involved, again, at an early age, in important national policy work. Stan's own home range would begin to expand when he begins to do work beyond the borders of North America. His experience in working with endangered species led to an invitation to work on endangered birds on islands in the Indian Ocean. And much to his mother's dismay, Stan skipped his PhD graduation ceremony, heading off to the Indian Ocean. His work there greatly expanded Stan's reputation in the international and conservation communities. None of the rare species he's launched programs for have gone extinct, and most, in fact, have increased in abundance. So Stan's work is taking him overseas, and the influence and ripple effect of that work is expanding internationally. Stan, while in the Indian Ocean, made his connection through the new Peregrine Fund that his mentor Tom Cade had been so important in setting up. The Peregrine Fund and its work in successfully breeding peregrines in captivity had reached the point now where serious reintroductions could begin. Stan returned to Cornell to head up the initial reintroductions. Publicity about the reintroductions further enhanced his reputation as an authority on endangered species, and he is still a student. So even through these early years, Rachel Carson, Aldo Leopold, Tom Cade, Joe Hickey, Stan is building on that early intuition and care that first struck him when he looked out that window on his first day of school and saw that injured bird. And the continuity of ethics in science and application of knowledge would become Stan's hallmark as he launches into the next phase of his journey. And to tell that story, I'm going to turn this over now to my colleague, David Drake.
Thank you very much, Kurt. And Stan, thank you very much for asking me to be part of your day today. I'm going to cover Stan's career from when he landed at the University of Wisconsin through the present day, starting with his beginning at the University of Wisconsin. So Joe Hickey had kept tabs on Stan throughout his time prior to coming to UW. And although Joe recruited Stan to be his successor at the University of Wisconsin in the Department of Wildlife Ecology, the fact that Stan's training was not in traditional wildlife management presented some hesitancy in the department. However, Stan's experience and his appreciation for Aldo Leopold won the faculty over. Stan's passion for teaching led him to teach quite a few courses in the department, and his classes became very popular across campus, especially his signature class, Extinction of Species, which is still taught to this day. He quickly attracted a large number of graduate students to his growing research program and lab in Wisconsin and around the world. Stan's work on endangered species generally focused on identifying key threats to species and devising recovery programs that government agencies and conservation organizations could implement. His contributions were often very significant, but often also behind the scenes. Stan was actually a conservation biologist, both at heart and as a career person, before that field gained self-recognition. His established reputation and contributions to biodiversity conservation resulted in a leadership role in the new Society for Conservation Biology. However, much to Stan's dismay, his leadership role drew criticism from traditional wildlife managers who initially regarded conservation biology as a competitor rather than an ally. Stan spent much of his time resolving that conflict and may, to this day, still be doing so. International consulting and research projects resulted in Stan and his students working in places where there were threats to species and the habitats they depended upon. Fulbright fellowships allowed Stan to greatly expand his role in conservation programs in both the Caribbean region and Latin America. Stan's work in Wisconsin benefited a number of threatened species. The reintroduction program for trumpeter swans was significantly enhanced by the contributions from Stan and his students. Working on habitat fragmentation influenced the design of protected areas throughout Wisconsin. And Stan's research in Venezuela identified and reduced threats to dick sissels on their wintering ground and halted the decline in the Midwestern breeding range. Stan became a hero to some and a villain to others for exposing the impacts of free-ranging cats on wildlife. His pioneering work informed several initiatives, such as the Cats Indoors program, and inspired other researchers to replicate his research in other places. The cat research probably generated more controversy than any other project, as the quote, or possibly threat on the slide suggests. Within months of arriving in Wisconsin, both Fred and Fran Hammerstrom recruited Stan to become the chair of the Wisconsin Society for Ornithology, their research committee. Building on his longtime interest in engaging citizen scientists, Stan developed the Wisconsin Checklist Project. And when he took over editorship of the Passenger Pigeon, Stan transformed the journal into one of the leading state ornithological journals. Stan's engagement with Wisconsin conservation groups reflects his personal and professional commitment to staying engaged with such groups that are implementing measures that he can add value to through both his knowledge and his experience. And as Kurt alluded to, Stan did retire from academia in 2008, but he failed miserably at retirement. After retiring from UW, he quickly picked up the pace of his always active outreach efforts, and the Elder Leopold Foundation provided the perfect match for his interests. As an emeritus professor, Stan has either taught or guest lectured in UW classes every semester since 2008. And recognizing that historical events could provide ideal teachable moments to talk about conservation issues, Stan has repeatedly capitalized on linking the history of conservation to contemporary conservation challenges. His extensive activities during the centenary of the passenger pigeon is a great example of this. Induction into the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame is the latest of many recognition of Stan's contributions to wildlife ecology and conservation biology. Congratulations, Stan, on a long, productive, and a meaningful career and a well-deserved honor.
Thank you, David. David, I just wanted to also mention that you are the professor and extension wildlife specialist in the Department of Forest and Wildlife Ecology at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. So
I am.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I want to bestow this honor on behalf of the Board of Directors of the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame Foundation that we officially recognize Stan Temple as being inducted into the Hall of Fame. And I'd like to now share with you an image of the plaque for Stan, which will be hanging which is hanging in the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame Gallery at Schmickley Reserve in Stevens Point, Wisconsin. I'd like to read the quotes on the plaque for everyone to be able to appreciate them. The first one is by Buddy Huffaker, and Buddy says, Dr. Temple's scholarship and voluminous scientific contributions have helped reshape the entire field of wildlife ecology and management. In fact, it is difficult to identify one single contribution as being most significant given the breadth and depth of his work. And the second quote is from William Karasoff, and William says, Most academic researchers strive to excel in research and instruction and perhaps make modest contributions in outreach. Stan absolutely stands out as one who has also excelled in outreach. All right, what I'd like to do now is to say big congratulations, Stan Temple, for this deserving honor. And you are now a member of the esteemed conservationists in our state who have been inducted into the Hall of Fame. I would like to invite you now to share some thoughts with us, thoughts that I am sure all the listeners are really eager to hear. The podium is yours, Stan.
Okay, well, thank you, Patty. Of course, it's an honor that the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame has decided to vote me in. I very much appreciate that. And of course, I'm grateful to those who nominated me. That includes the Aldo Leopold Foundation and the Department of Forest and Wildlife Ecology at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And the ringleaders of that nomination was Buddy Huffaker and David Blockstein and Kurt Meine. And I'd also, of course, like to thank the many individuals and conservation organizations that wrote letters of support for my nomination. They were very much appreciated. So as Patty said, I'm joining a long line of colleagues in the Department of Forest and Wildlife Ecology who've been inducted. It includes Aldo Leopold, Bill Shorger, Joe Hickey, Bob McCabe, Bob Ellerson, and of course, most recently, Scott Craven. So I'm joining a distinguished group. Well, the organizers have asked me to do something beside thank everyone for all that they've done to make this induction possible, but to share some insights from my career in conservation. This was an interesting assignment, something I never really thought seriously about, but it led to what I hope will be some sage insights. So, as is the case for almost all of us, some of the things that I learned during my life came from my elders, and other things, of course, were learned by personal experience. I'm going to first share some things that I learned from my elders and include a few key quotes that document their wisdom. So Rachel Carson, my childhood mentor, I've learned that curiosity about how the world works and a sense of wonder about nature are solid foundations for success in conservation. And as Rachel Carson said, the more clearly we can focus our attention on the wonders and realities of the world, the less taste we shall have for its destruction. I've learned that a conservationist must have a strong moral compass, because conservation is always a matter of deciding what's right and wrong. And of course, Aldo Leopold left us his now iconic golden rule: a thing is right when it tends to preserve the integrity, stability, and beauty of the biotic community. It is wrong when it tends otherwise. So continuing, I've learned that being a successful conservationist requires an ability to connect dots in ways that most people can't even imagine. E.O. Wilson, one of my elders, says, "We are drowning in information while starving for wisdom. The world henceforth will be run by synthesizers, people who are able to put together the right information at the right time, think critically about it, and make important choices wisely." I've learned that the emperor may have no clothes, so think critically about everything you've been told or read. My next door neighbor, when I was an undergraduate at Cornell, Carl Sagan, had this to say: "At the heart of science is an essential balance between two seemingly contradictory attitudes, an openness to new ideas and the most ruthless skeptical scrutinism of all ideas, old and new. This is how deep truths are winnowed from deep nonsense." And finally, I've learned that if you can't communicate your ideas clearly, you probably won't have much impact as a conservationist. From Aldo Leopold, "Language is imperative, for if we are to guide land use, we must talk sense to farmer and economist, pioneer and poet, stockman and philosopher, lumberjack and geographer, engineer and historian." So I've learned a lot from my elders, but things that I've learned by my own personal experience include how to pick a good role model. I've learned that good role models are people who took a principled stand at the right time, regardless of personal consequences. Both Rachel Carson and Joe Hickey, my predecessor at UW, took principled stands about the use of pesticides, and both of them were basically disrespected as a result. My major professor, Tom Cade, decided to make a bold move by switching from purely academic research to the recovery program for the peregrine falcon, something that many of his academic peers thought was abandoning his role as a professor and becoming much more of an activist. I admire all three of these for those principled stands. I've learned that timing really can be everything, and serendipity can be a powerful force in shaping one's career. Thinking about it, I could identify 8 events in my life that were pivotal, but that I had no reason to expect that they were going to be so important in my life. From that chance meeting with Rachel Carson back in the early 1950s, to landing the job at the Cleveland Museum of Natural History, especially being a student at the dawn of the environmental movement and suddenly having the activism that environmentalism is marked by become a legitimate endeavor. Reading the first Red Data book in 1967, which was the list of endangered birds around the world, had a huge impact. Realizing how many species were endangered and how many of them were likely to go extinct before I ever had a chance to see them really motivated me to want to work on endangered species. The work with the Peregrine Fund led to the opportunity to help influence the Endangered Species Act, and of course led to my opportunity to work on some of the world's rarest birds in the Indian Ocean. All of this led to being picked as the successor to Joe Hickey and the third person in the historic line of that faculty position. And finally, the birth of conservation biology. None of these events did I have much control over, but they had huge influences on my life. I've learned that sometimes you have to make tough choices. As a just about to graduate PhD student, I had 2 choices. I could either do a postdoc in ecology with Robert MacArthur, who was a leading ecologist at the time, or work on endangered species in the Indian Ocean. Obviously, I picked the second choice, and my career was on a path that it probably wouldn't have taken if I had done the postdoc with Robert MacArthur. And during my career, the choice of joining the faculty at the University of Wisconsin versus joining the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in an administrative position, again, were pivotal decisions that I had to make, and I'd have to say I made the right decision. While working in the Indian Ocean, I had my first chance to really experience controversy. And I've learned that no matter how thin you slice it, there are always 2 sides, and reasonable people can look at the same thing and see something totally different. When I proposed eradicating introduced rabbits that were threatening over a dozen endemic species that were found nowhere else except on tiny Round Island, the international animal welfare, animal rights community protested. They said they would rather see the extinction of all those species on Round Island than endorse the use of poisons to kill a couple of thousand rabbits. I couldn't believe when I heard that. Later on in my career, when the work of my students and I demonstrated that captive breeding and reintroduction was going to be the only real future for the California condor, some conservationists objected, saying that they would rather see the last California condors go extinct in the wild than have the birds taken into captivity. Well, Round Island's free of rabbits today, and we have over 160 California condors in the wild. So these controversies do have a way of resolving themselves. I've learned that you'll never be able to convince everyone, no matter how hard you try, and despite evidence. And that's nowhere more clear than in my work with cats and my inability, despite concerted efforts, to convince pet cat owners to keep their cats indoors. I've learned that whatever hits the fan will not be evenly distributed. So don't be surprised if you're in a prominent role that you can readily become a scapegoat, as I did with cats and wildlife issues. And I've learned that your reputation in life can be threatened in an instant by people who don't even know you, including this death threat from a cat activist who didn't take time to check the facts and realize that I had never killed a cat in my life. I've also learned that sometimes I get along with animals much better than people. I've learned that a crisis often leads to paradigm shifts and exciting new opportunities. The extinction crisis and biodiversity loss set the stage for two pivotal events in my career: the passage of the Endangered Species Act of 1973 and the emergence of conservation biology as a formal discipline. I've learned that the easiest way to stay intellectually sharp is to surround yourself with people smarter and usually younger than yourself. And the students, both graduate students and undergrads that I've interacted with, made sure of that throughout my career. I've learned that variety really is the spice of life, and having diverse interests kept me from stagnating. My students and I have worked in 28 countries, 48 different ecosystems, and the total that I came up with was 546 species are mentioned in our publications. And if you look at the key words that describe many of my publications in the literature, you can see the diversity of things that my students and I have investigated. I've also learned that it's important to keep a balance between your personal and professional lives. And for me, outdoor activities, especially falconry, being alone out in nature with a bird of prey was a great way for me to keep my sanity when everything else seemed to be going wrong in my life. So I certainly value those times with my trained birds of prey. Finally, I've learned that one should never let a teachable moment about conservation slip past without using it to full advantage. Since I've been engaged as a senior fellow with the Alda Leopold Foundation, I've given hundreds of presentations. 3 of these took full advantage of current events that were opportunities to link Alda Leopold's legacy to these current issues. The talks that I give on phenology and climate change and Alda Leopold's legacy have been given more than 150 times. During 2014, in the centenary of the passenger pigeon's extinction, I gave over 100 presentations. And just a couple of years ago, on the centenary of the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, I gave over 40 presentations. So these opportunities are ones that I will continue to take advantage of throughout the rest of my active career. And finally, I've learned that no meal is complete without chocolate. So my advice is to take time to savor the sweetness of accomplishments that really satisfied you. And certainly paramount among those for me were the 75 amazing graduate students who studied with me. They've all gone on to do amazing things in the conservation field. I'm also proud that I was able to reach more than 10,000 students in my classes at the UW-Madison. And I know that through the work that my students and I have done, many fascinating species are not extinct today, and many biologically important places have been protected as a result of our work. And certainly now, having been inducted into the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame, I will count today among the many moments that I will savor. Thank you very much to everyone who made that possible. Back to you, Patty.
Oh, wow, what words. Stan, thank you so much for making those right choices for the right reasons on those principled stands so that our world could be so much better today because of it. We sincerely appreciate your work, and we know that that legacy will continue on for decades to come through all of us.
Thank you, Patty.
I would like to turn the mic over, if you would, to Representative Katrina Shanklin, who will share a State of Wisconsin recognition.
Hi there, this is State Representative Katrina Shanklin with a citation of commendation from the state of Wisconsin. Know you by these presents. Whereas Dr. Stanley A. Temple has displayed a lifelong dedication to birds and bird species preservation, beginning in his adolescence and continuing as a teenager when he developed a love of falconry, and he became passionate about science and contributed voluminously to wildlife ecology in his adulthood. And whereas he earned his PhD at Cornell University in 1972 while studying at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, moving to Wisconsin after being hired as a faculty member in the Department of Wildlife Ecology at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And whereas Dr. Temple has passionately advocated for the protection of endangered bird species and has sought to educate the public on conservation by creating an educational program focused on preserving biological diversity while meeting human needs. And whereas Dr. Temple has taught over 10,000 students in courses covering human impacts on wildlife populations and the ecology of avian predators, and he has advised over 75 graduate students at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And whereas he has made several contributions to public policy and advanced conservation efforts, serving on many nonprofit conservation organizations and influencing state legislation through his research. And whereas Dr. Stanley A. Temple has been inducted to the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame for his steadfast commitment to raising awareness and protecting some of the rarest, most endangered bird species in Wisconsin and the United States. Now, therefore, the members of the Wisconsin State Legislature, on the motion of Representative Katrina Shankland, do hereby honor Dr. Stanley A. Temple for his dedication to the study of ornithology and wildlife ecology, and thank him for his deep commitment to the preservation of bird species in our state and country.
Stan, on behalf of the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame Foundation and the state of Wisconsin, we congratulate you. As we near the end of this ceremony, I want you to know we're turning on the live chat right now, and it'll be on for 5 minutes for all of you who are viewing this event live today. This is your time to share messages, memories, whatever it is with Stan that you would like to share, as if you were in the receiving line with him in person today. We'll make sure that we prepare a transcript for him and be able to share that with him afterwards, so he won't miss anything for your thoughts that you put in the chat today. A recording of the ceremony will be available on the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame website by the end of the month, and it may be watched again and again to share the legacy of Stan Temple for decades to come. We invite you to share it with those, especially those who may not have been able to join us today because they're across the world doing other great conservation work, for example, as I know Stan has moved the world in that direction. If you'd like to make a donation in honor of Stan Temple to the Wisconsin Conservation Hall of Fame, of course we welcome it. It's our opportunity to continue to share his accomplishments and the accomplishments of other inductees with an even wider audience as we continue our mission of celebrating, advancing, and sharing Wisconsin's conservation legacy by honoring our heroes in conservation. Just visit our website to make that donation if you like at the Join/Donate tab. We want to thank our event sponsors again, the Aldo Leopold Foundation, the Ice Age Trail Alliance, Jaeger Mellerop Family Charitable Trust, Luther College, Midwest Renewable Energy Association, Museum of Danish America, the Prairie Enthusiasts, Trout Unlimited, Wisconsin Council, Wisconsin Society for Ornithology, University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point, and Wisconsin Wildlife Federation. Registration still open for Gary Eldred's induction ceremony at 3 p.m. today. Just visit our website for that too. So this concludes our event, but what we're going to do is to play the video tribute of Stan Temple twice more for your enjoyment. And while that's going on, I'll read a few, well, just before that, I should say, I'll read a few of the congratulations notes that came into our office for Stan. Of course, he'll get a copy of all of them. I want to share a couple with you before we turn on that video. This one comes from Dr. Leela Hassa, and Leela Hassa is the executive director and co-founder of Lion Guardians. She writes, I have been working in the conservation space, mostly in East Africa, for the last 20 years. And when I think about some of the greatest minds in conservation who have had immeasurable influence on my career and how I lead it, it is Stan Temple. I am incredibly honored and grateful to have overlapped with Stan at UW before he retired. I vividly remember sitting in his office in the Forest and Wildlife Ecology building, chatting with him about my huge ideas to save lions in Africa, and his support and pragmatic advice based on real, tangible experiences in the conservation world. These chats were invaluable and impacted the way I lead and mentor others. I would not be a conservationist today without having known professors like Stan Temple, who are amazing naturalists and inspired me to use my love of nature in a way that is impactful and lasting. Hongera sana, hope I said it right, that is congratulations in Swahili to Stan, and thank you. Another congratulations note of many that we have received is one from Nancy Nabak, a historian with the Wisconsin Society for Ornithology. Nancy writes, "It is my honor to know Dr. Temple through the enjoyment of birds. His research and missionary-like passion spreading the word about avian conservation is exemplary. And I have been privileged to work with him on a couple of projects, including his outstanding centennial recognition of the extinction of the passenger pigeon and the rededication ceremony of the passenger pigeon monument at Wyalusing State Park. Had it not been for Dr. Temple, this amazing milestone may not have been recognized in such a grand way as of deserving for this iconic and important yet lost species. Through his work, we are inspired to work harder, to protect and defend our avian friends." Again, Nancy Nabak. So what I'd like to do now is say goodbye and invite you to watch the tribute to Stan Temple on the video again. Thanks, everyone.